What do you believe is the appropriate role of a school trustee as it relates to selecting instructional materials for use in classrooms? And you will have 2 minutes each to answer this question. We're going to start with Jimmy McAndrew.
Great question. Great question. I think I know the role of the school board trustee is to be in the weeds, to be hands-on. And I think they're honestly the first line of defense between, what's going to arrive in front of those kids and what's delivered to them. So, I mean, really the buck starts and stops with the trustees, and they need to make the time, make the effort, and make a concerted effort into making sure that what's placed in front of our kids and what's expected of them is going to allow those kids to flourish in the real world, whether they're ready for a job the day after graduation, they're moving on to a trade school, or they're moving on to a community college or a 4-year institution. We need to make sure that curriculum is chock full of challenging and relative and relevant information so that the kids can move on. I mean, we need to make sure that our kids have a bright future. So I think that that's one of the most important roles of a trustee. That's where they get into the weeds. That's where they dig down deep, and that's where they need to spend a lot of their time, because we can talk all we want about student achievement, but unless the recipe is there to challenge the kids and put them in the right place, we're failing.
Thanks, Jimmy. Next, we have Mike Stavish, Zone 2. Mike?
Thank you. I would say the most important thing to consider when we would look at a curriculum is that it doesn't conflict with our community values. We want to make sure that this curriculum will produce in our children, or at least not conflate in our children, the positive life values that we want them to have, that we know, time-tested ideas that are going to help them succeed in their lives and help them go forward in their futures. After that, we of course need to consider that it serves our specific community needs. What kind of jobs do we offer here in Kootenai County? We don't want every single high school graduate to leave. That's a town that's dying, that's failing. We need to understand what kind of jobs do we offer here, and how can we produce students who are quickly and easily able to slide into them. We also need to consider how this curriculum actually performs. Of course, this is the end goal. Does it actually do what it says it's supposed to do? If that lines up with our core values and it lines up with producing students that actually serve our community specifically, then we can evaluate with testing and all these other things that it actually does what it is supposed to do. I see in the current curriculums we have going, a lot of them take the name SEL and other things like that. When I read the descriptions of what they do and what they're supposed to do, it sounds like a lot of rigmarole and kind of like just hippy dippy, get around in a circle and let's talk about how we feel about math instead of doing math. I have serious doubts teachers are even doing that. So I feel like this particular curriculum is silly, and there's a lot of objections that it might be worse than silly. I hope to look into that and make sure that is not the case. Either way, the curriculum needs to serve our specific community needs and not conflict with our community values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we will have Heather TenBrink, Zone 3. Heather?
So when selecting school curriculum resources, one of the most important things to consider is age appropriateness. I think we need to consider age appropriate materials that present subject matters objectively and accurately. So our children, and from elementary and especially by the time they get to high school, they need to know how to think, how to analyze material, weigh evidence, and form their own well-reasoned opinions, and then how to present those opinions. That's a skill all of us need here in our current life. And I firmly believe that academic materials that are intended to advance a political narrative or disparage any sort of group don't belong in our schools. Those are not good materials for our children. We also need to prepare our kids to be good citizens, to go be ready to support themselves and their families, but also to be prepared to support their neighbors and our country. And so that's a consideration as we look at curricular materials. I just want to speak a little bit about how our curricular materials are currently adopted. Right now, we will put together a committee. This committee involves teachers, community members, and parents, and they look at curricular materials and make a recommendation to the board. And then the board reviews that recommendation, and then at that time, we have, to this point, decided to send that recommendation out to the general public for a 30-day comment period. So then anyone can look at the curricular materials and comment, give us their opinion on those materials before we make a decision on whether to adopt them and use them in our classrooms or not. I think rigorous academic instruction is so important for our kids. We need to be teaching our kids to think and learn, and our materials need to do that for them.
Thank you, Heather. Next, we will have Matt Blat, also Zone 3.
Well, thanks. So it was actually interesting to watch the curriculum adoption process here this year. It wasn't bad. Unfortunately, of the products that were available, many were just awful, just full of inappropriate material and objectionable material. The group itself was pretty good. It was professionals, teachers. They understand the art and science of teaching. And frankly, the board members shouldn't try to be the experts in every aspect of how the school district is run. It's good to offload, or I should say offload, but to depend on subject matter experts to make their best recommendations. Now, that said, there's a couple issues that came up. First was, with the first time adoption of an actual coherent plan from K through 6, none of the teachers were afforded protected time to write new class plans. So it's great that we adopted this new material, but the teachers aren't given time to actually figure out what they're going to do day to day and week to week. Next thing is, the board sets direction, but they also provide oversight. And the issues that I was seeing and the things that the board should be focused on is the prevention of childhood exploitation. There are a lot of materials that are snuck into these documents, such as social emotional learning, that the board needs to be very aggressive in preventing from accessing our schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And finally, we'll have Yasmin Harris, Zone 2. Yasmin?
Well, thank you. When you ask the appropriate role of a trustee, to me, I consider it one of the most important roles when it comes to our curriculum. It's important that we are listening to what the community wants, and I do understand that we do take it back to the local community. However, we have to be mindful and aware of what is going on around us, and that there are agendas, there are areas where there can be infiltration into our communities, into our curriculum, and that is the most important thing to be mindful of. When we're talking about student achievement, that is the priority above all else. And it starts with our curriculum. And I do believe that social and emotional well-being is very important when it comes to our children. However, it is also a distraction that is taking away from the fundamentals in our education. I think it's important that we can take it back to basics. The purpose of education, why we are sending our children to school. We want them to be productive members of society. We want them to understand reading, writing, arithmetic. We are somewhat losing sight of that. And I think that this is something that is very important to me and something that I would take very seriously, and believe in picking the absolute best curriculum we can possibly pick. Our teachers deserve that, our students deserve that, and it's important we're listening to our community.